Firefox, because if you try going to this in Chrome, it will just sort of blow up on you. And you won't see this environment. Okay, so one thing that's different than last semester is last semester it took us over to Vocrum. Now it's embedded within Canvas. So that's just something that's a little new. So again, you have Time Lab. So we're going to click on Start Lab. And where'd my doc go? And move you guys over there while I'm doing this. Okay, gonna take a little bit to spin up. Questions while, oh, that went really quick. I didn't even get a drink real quick. Okay, so our lab has started. Now we're gonna click on, see this one, it says, okay, lab has started. We can click on AWS to dive into the AWS environment. If you get this particular screen, all it is saying is that you were recently with this browser logged into an AWS lab. Log out, click log out, close that screen, and then go back in. Each lab uses a unique ID to log in, so that's why you may occasionally get that error. It's normal, just click, log out, go back, you're right back in. So we're back in our AWS Management Console. So for this first lab, what our activity is we're going to build a static website on S3. So we're going to upload some content, and we're going to make it publicly addressable. So what we're going to be doing in this lab is we're going to create a bucket in S3. We're going to upload contents to the bucket. We're going to enable access to the bucket objects, and we're going to update the website. So where do we go? So first thing we want to do is we're going to create a bucket. So we want to go into services. We're going to go into S3. Once you put things, pull management interfaces up initially, then they're going to get into your shortcuts to your recently visited over here. So just a heads up on that. Okay, get back to S3. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to create a bucket. So we're in S3. We're going to create a bucket. We're going to give our bucket a name. Remember, you can't use uppercase. You can only use lowercase when you're actually defining your bucket. So ours is going to be website. And make sure you use a dash. The grading engine will not grade your lab properly if you do not use a dash in the name. So make sure that you do website dash and then some random number at the end. Keep the region the same. We're going to clear the block all public access. So that's going to allow anybody to come see our web page. Yes, I know I am opening up my S3 bucket to the world. So it's basically giving you a, are you sure you want to do this? Because I've had enough people that didn't realize what they were doing by turning that off. And we are not going to do anything about versioning on this one. We'll do that on our next lab. And we're going to say create bucket. So now we created our bucket. Now what we want to do is we're going to go into our S3 bucket. So we're going to click on our bucket. We're going to go into properties. And now what we want to do is we're going to make it so that this can be a website. So we scroll all the way down to the bottom of properties. And we're going to go into static website hosting. And we're going to select edit, enable. And we're going to do host a static website. Our index document is going to be index.html. And our error document is going to be error.html. We're just using the defaults on those. And then save changes. And then we're going to also go to tags, and we're going to go edit, and we're going to add a tag, and we're going to call the key is department. And then we're going to give it a value of marketing. And then we save the changes there. Did those two steps in reverse order of what they are in the lab. Sorry about that. Okay, now that we've done that, we can click on, now that we have a static website, we can click on the link and then it'll take us to where that website would be. And it'll go 403 forbidden. No, you can't go here. Sorry. And it's like, okay, why is that happening? Well, it's because we haven't put anything there. We don't have anything in our bucket. Our bucket is totally empty. We have no objects in our bucket, so there's nothing to present. So now what we want to do is we want to upload some content to our bucket. And so in the lab document, and down here, there are 3 files that you want to download to your computer. There's going to be an index.html, a scripts.js, and a style.css. So you'll want to download those 3 files. Now that you have those 3 files downloaded, select Upload, Add Files. You have to go find them. And AWS Labs, Static Website. That's Challenge Lab. That's the next one. Okay, so you can select all 3, open, and then we want to go and say upload. And all 3 of those uploaded successfully. So now what we want to do is we're going to go back to S3, to our website, and then we want to highlight our documents, go to Actions, and then what we want to do is say Make Public, so that now these pages are actually going to be available to the outside world. So before we do that, if we go back to our page here, even though we have the files there, it still comes back and says, no, you can't see anything here, access denied. Now we go back here, we're going to go Action, Make Public. Yes, we want to make those public. Gives you the warning saying, are you sure you want to do that? Okay, so we have 3 objects successfully done. So we can click Exit. Now we have our objects, and now we go back here, and we can reload our page, and boom, now our page is actually loading how we expect it to. So now if we want to actually modify something, we can go into one of those pages. And so we're going to go into actually, I just want to pull up. So this is where you can do this next step in any text editor. And I'm looking for mine. I should have had that up too. This way. Oh, I know that. Make things more efficient, what I'm going to do is, where'd it go? I'm going to say that I've already opened a text editor, modified this one offline. So I'm just going to grab my modified one. So we're going to add a file. And actually, I can do this. I like using Visual Studio Code, which you should all have on your laptops, I believe. It's just a nice text editor when you're doing things like editing code, that it actually does the color coding on there. And so all we're doing on this one is we're going down and we're going to change the head sub main, and we're just saying we're putting our name in there. And so we're just going to do that modification, save the file. And then we're going to upload that changed file. To our site. And then when we reload our that's right. I have to go back and actually say that that particular file now is publicly available. And then go back to the website. Now we reload that. And now it says created by me. So we modified the index.html. and we're able to bring that in. So now that we've done those, that is lab 1. So then once we finish lab 1, so then what you want to do is while it's still open, click on submit. And this is where the auto grader kicks in. And it says, are you sure you want to submit? And yes, we are sure we want to submit. We're done. So it's not closing the lab when you hit submit. What it's doing is it is now running a script against it, sort of like the Red Hat stuff we did at the end of last semester, to check to see if the variables that are included in the lab were actually completed. And then here we can see that bucket name was found, website was configured, files were uploaded, and static website is reachable. So all the testing conditions were met. So we got 20 out of 20 on our score. So this is one where the dash on the website name is important. So let's say we had forgotten our dash. Then we can go back actually in, change the S3 bucket, create a new S3 bucket with a dash in the name, resave it, and then go back and resubmit, and it will regrade that for you. So it's not a one and done type thing. It's a, if you don't get all the points, that means something went squirrely, and then you can go back in and fix it and then rerun it. And then your final score that you have here is what is actually posted to Canvas, and that'll be your grade. And so on this one, you got 20 out of 20, which in the AWS Canvas grade book will say you got 100%. And then I will, on a lab, multiply that by 0.5. So you would have gotten all 50 lab points for that particular lab if you get a 20 out of 20. That you click on End Lab. And yes, we want to end the lab. That will then close out that environment. If you don't hit End Lab, you won't be able to start the next lab until this one is ended, which you will have to wait till the timer expires. And you want to save your resources so that if you need to, for some reason, come back into this lab rather than having, because again, like last semester, once you start these labs, a timer starts. It tells you how long you have for that particular lab. If you leave it and come back in before the timer expires, you're able to get back in right where you were. If you leave it and come back after the timer has expired, it will have totally blanked out the lab and you're going to have to start over. So just be aware of that when you're working on these labs. Okay, so now that that one is closing out, we can close out of there. And I want to go back to here. Okay, so what we did is we created a bucket in Amazon S3. We uploaded contents, we enabled access, and we updated one of the pages. Okay. Next lab, creating a static website for our cafe customers. And get that one up. Okay. There. Yeah. There it goes. Okay, so starter lab. So on this one, we have our little description about what it is and why we're going to go through this. Is we have that our customers, which is this husband and wife team who own a small cafe, they want to set up a website for their company and they want to be able to manage it themselves. They're going to build it in S3, which they're a small enough company right now that probably fiscally doesn't make sense, but we're doing it for the sake of this lab. And they're going to grow, and then it'll make more sense as we go later on into the semester. So Sophia is suggesting to Frank and Martha that they should expand community awareness of what the cafe has to offer. Cafe currently doesn't have a web presence, and it doesn't currently use any cloud computing services. And so what your job is going to be is to change that. So what our objective is going to be is we're going to make a static website using S3. We're going to implement a way to protect the data on S3, so it's read-only, so that people can't modify anything on there. We're going to implement a data lifecycle strategy for these files, so that they, if a file ages out, then it will go away. We're going to implement a disaster recovery strategy, so we're going to replicate this to another region. And then that will build out our architecture. And just have to wait for this to start quick here. And while that's going, we'll just go, this is what so Frank likes the idea. He has been taking photos that can be used to highlight the cafe's menu items. So we have some photos that we're going to be including in there in an image folder already. Yeah, so we're going to be uploading content to the S3 bucket, creating a bucket policy to grant public read access, enabling versioning on the S3 bucket, set a lifecycle policy, and enable cross-region replication. So those will be the things that we're going to do. And so our final product will be that we're going to have a website that then is built across, is primarily in one region and has a backup copy in another region. And that will be the site that we're building out. Okay, so lab is ready. Let's see if I can do this in 65 minutes. That's easy. Okay, so we're going to go into AWS. Let's see if it has a diagram in here. Oh, is that a diagram? Okay. So we're going to dive into AWS. And same normal error because we started another lab and it was still, the cache was thinking that we're logged in as that other lab. We go log out, come back, log back in. Okay, now we're in. So we're in S3. So first thing we're going to do, to the right place in the documentation. Oh, on this one, it's going to have a zip file. Yeah. That you can grab from this link. You need to download that zip file, and that zip file will then have the folders and files that you're going to be uploading for the actual site once you make your S3 bucket. So for our bucket, one of the things it doesn't say in the lab, but it's sort of this weird little thing about how the grading engine works on this. So this is a word of warning, is make sure your bucket name starts with a lower letter than the backup bucket name that we're going to make later. So what you want is if you start your bucket name with an A for the one where you're building your site, then start your bucket for where your backup is going to be with a B or greater. Because when the grading script runs through, what it's doing is it's looking for the first bucket that it finds and running the grading engine against that. So if you happen to have your first bucket here called Zanzibar, and your other bucket is called Alpha, it will grade your backup S3 bucket instead of grading your Zanzibar backup or S3 bucket, and you won't actually get scored properly because it's looking at a bucket that doesn't have all the settings against it that you need to get a proper score. So just a word of warning on that one, and I'll sort of show it on this too. So we're going to call this one Alpha. Okay. Yep, sorry. So we're going to create a bucket. Sorry. Not talking, we want to create a bucket. And we're going to call it Alpha Web. Remember, bucket names have to be all lowercase. We're going to keep the region the same. We are going to turn off the block all public access. Yes, we know that we're bad Will Robinson warning. And at this point, yeah, we are doing versioning is the next step. So, and then we'll create our bucket. So now we have our Alpha Web bucket created. Now we can click on our Alpha Web bucket. Now we're going to upload that content that we downloaded, that zip file. We're going to add a file. Okay, so the file will just do the index.html, and then we're going to add folders. And we're going to add our image folder. And it's going, are you sure you want to upload all the stuff in the image folder? Yes, we are. And we're going to add another folder, and that will be our CSS folder. And yes, for sure, we want to upload that. And then upload. And then we need to upload those files that we just grabbed. while that's uploading. So these labs do have another feature, is they have sometimes questions associated with the labs that you need to answer along the way. And so this particular lab does. So if you go into details, go into show, and then access the multiple choice questions. And then what it's going to do is you're going to have questions associated with the lab that you also need to answer that goes into part of the lab grade. So this particular one is going to have 4 different questions, and at different stages in the lab, you're going to be answering different questions along the way. So the first one, when viewing the website after task 3, do you see the page in the browser? So then we can close that, and then you just keep that page up throughout the lab as you're going through until you answer all the questions. So now we've uploaded all of the pages, but we haven't actually made this a website yet, so we need to go into properties, static website hosting, edit, enable. Our index document is index.html. So this part is pretty similar to what we did before in the other lab. And error.html, save changes. And then we're going to go and click on that link to pull up our website. Website didn't come up. Any idea why our website didn't come up? Anybody have an answer? Or are you all glazed over with how fast I'm flying through stuff? Okay, the reason it's not showing up is that on our S3 bucket, all the information that we put in there is not currently publicly available. But we're going to do something a little different this time in order to do it. Rather than just have it that it's publicly read-write, everybody can do whatever the heck they want with it. What we want to do is we're going to put some rules in place. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create a bucket policy to grant public read-only access to our files. So what we're going to do is, where did it go? Yeah, we want to have it so that it's read-only to public anonymous users. So we're going to go to properties. And this is one, what it does is it actually gives you a reference. And this is the first of the references that I was talking about. And let me pull up another web page here. And so the link will take you here. And so here it's saying bucket policy examples is what the link. So in the lab itself, where we are, it is creating a bucket policy to grant public read access. So then it says, hint, if you get stuck, refer to the example in AWS documentation. So if you follow that link, it takes you here. And then what is it that we're trying to do? And we're trying to create a bucket policy that grants read-only permissions to public anonymous users. Granting read-only public. Okay, here's what we want. It's right here. Okay, now we get a script. We're going, okay. So we got a script that we're going to copy. We're going to go back to our console. We're going to go to permissions. And we want a bucket policy. So we're going to create a bucket policy. So we'll go to edit. And then we are going to paste that in. But that won't work because this is actually going against the example bucket, but we need to put it against our bucket. So what we need to do is copy our bucket, ARN, which is up here. So we can just click on there to copy that. And then we're going to change it down here. So what we want to replace is the ARN that was for the demo with the ARN of our particular website. And ours is Alpha Web in this case. So now we have our ARN in here. And we can say save changes, which now makes it publicly accessible as read-only. So now if we go back to our web page here, we have our happy website. Now that we have our happy website, now what we need to do is do some more changes. So Sophia's going, oh, cool, that looks sort of cool. But I want some updates to the web page. I don't like the color scheme. And so you go, oh, great, this is going to be fun. So you want to go back to your Alpha Web. And what she has is a couple changes that she wants to make to some of the CSS so that she doesn't like the colors. She doesn't like these colors down here, so she wants some different colors. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and edit our index.html. And again, I'm going to use Visual Studio Code for that. So I'm going to go and open it. And so what you're going to change on that is you're going to change, where did we want? Yeah. So we're going to change three things. Is we're going to change the BG color or background color. Originally it was aquamarine. We're going to change it to Gainsborough. We're going to change the background color for this particular tag to corn silk. And we're going to change the other one to also match it with Gainsborough. So we're changing three of the CSS colors that are associated with those boxes down on the bottom. So we're going to make those three changes into our index.html file using a text editor of your choice. I happen to like Visual Studio Code. You can use Notepad++, or you can even just use Notepad. So you make those changes, save the file. Now what we're going to do is upload that file. And labs, index, open, upload. And then I actually had one other change in there, which I forgot about. Sorry about that. That's why the image is so big up here, because we do another change later on. But now we changed this color schema for these. So we push those changes up. But now we're going, okay, if we make changes to files, we need some way to actually know how those changes are happening and be able to version control. Because right now, we uploaded a new copy of that file, and well, we can't see that there's more than one copy. And we don't know what the original copy was. Let's say we made a change like, why is this image so big? We don't want that way. We need to fix that. And we need to go back to the previous version to fix it. And it's going, oh, we don't have a previous version to go back to. Sorry. So what you want to do is you want to turn on versioning. So we're going to go to Properties. And where did that go? Bucket versioning. So we're going to go to bucket versioning, edit. We're going to enable bucket versioning, save changes. And we're going to go back to our index.html file. And it happened to be that the height was auto, but the width was auto, and we don't want the width was auto. We want the width to be 450. We're going to save that. And then we're going to go back to our S3 bucket. Go back to Alpha Web. We're going to upload a new copy of that index.html that fixes our boo-boo. Upload. It's now uploaded. So now we get this little button, and this is one point that the lab documentation is wrong. The joy of agile development in the GUI is now if we want to see any additional versions, we select list versions, and now we can see that here is our earlier version is down here, and then here is our version we just uploaded. So now we can see that we have version control. We can see the whole list of any files and when they've been modified and what's changed. And now if we go back to our web page, our images are more normal. We don't have this crazy image taking up the whole screen. So now we can actually see that versions changed. We have it actually managed. We can watch those. So we're doing pretty good. So we have version control on our S3 bucket. We are modifying files, we're able to bring those across. And now what we want to do is we want to have some way that if something happens to this particular one, we have a backup copy somewhere. And so what we're going to want to do is we're going to Oh, yeah. First, we're going to do life cycle. Sorry, got myself ahead of myself. Is we want to create a life cycle so that as new versions come about, if we don't want to get back to this version after a period of time, we can abandon the old version. So what we want to do is we're going to set a policy. So we're going to go to management, and we want to create a life cycle rule. So we're going to create a life cycle rule, and we're going to apply it to all objects in the bucket. And yes, we know it is to everything in the bucket. And so what we're going to do is we want to moves previous of all, so previous versions after 30 days to standard S3 IA, and then after 365 days, delete it. So what we want to do is transition previous versions of objects between storage classes, and we want to permanently delete previous versions of objects. And so the transitions, that one opened up this transitions non-current versions of objects between storage classes. And so by default, it wants to move it to standard IA, which is the next tier down. And then after how many days do we want that to happen? We're going to say 30. And then permanently delete versions of objects. A number of days an object becomes previous versions, and we're going to do 365. And so we're setting up sort of a two-tiered, that two different things will happen. First, after 30 days, so that initial boo-boo index.html file, that'll just bump down to standard IA storage after 30 days. And after 365 days, it's just deleted and gone. And then we can say create rule. Oops, didn't give it a name. So you need to make sure you give it a name, also another lowercase thing. And so this is going to be, I'm going to just call it move data 1. So now we have a rule that will then move any data that is sitting there as an old version after 30 days to basically an archive state, and then after 365 days, delete it. Now we want to increase durability. So now we want to have it that if that Godzilla event happens, we have some way of preventing our data from going away. So what we're going to want to do on this one is we're going to set up cross-region replication. So this is going to be replicating between our primary region and a secondary region. So the first thing we're going to need to do is create another bucket. And so that's when we're going to create a bucket. And this is where it needs to be if you're doing an alpha sort after your initial bucket name. And that's just so that the scoring engine will actually score your stuff properly. So this is just a word of warning that the first bucket and the backup bucket need to be lower in the sort queue. So we're going to create a bucket. This one I'm just going to call Zeta backup. And we want to put it in a different region because, again, we're backing up to a different region for durability. So we're going to back up over to Oregon. And we don't need to worry about versioning. Oh, it says to enable versioning. So we want to enable versioning. Okay, so we can create our bucket. We got a name. Oops, I did the bad habit. I still like capitalizing stuff, and in creating S3 buckets in AWS, you can't capitalize anything. It all has to be lowercase. So it's just, if it yells at you, it'll basically say, you have uppercase, it needs to be all lowercase. Oh, somebody else use that because it has to be unique in the world. Okay, so now we have our Zeta backup and our alpha. And so now what we need to do is set up a rule to do the replication from this bucket, which is in Northeast US, I'm in Virginia, over to Oregon. So we're going to go into our S3 bucket. We're going to go into management. We're going to replication rules, create a replication rule. We're going to call this backup alpha. It's going to be enabled. Source bucket is the bucket that we're in. We're going to do all objects in the bucket. Destination, we want to specify a bucket, but we're using the same account. So we'll browse our S3 buckets. We're going to grab Zeta. That's where we're going to put it. And then the IAM role, they predefined a role for us that we're going to use as the security role to make this happen. Because you need to have a security role defined that actually can do this operation. So we're going to use the cafe role, which is predefined on that. If we want to view it, we can actually see what settings it has. And it takes a little bit. And then it documents all the different settings that that particular IAM role has associated with what it's allowed to do. And in future labs, we'll be building those roles. But for this particular lab, we're just using the pre-built. We aren't doing anything with encryption. We aren't doing anything with destination storage class. And we aren't doing anything with additional replication objects. So we'll click Save. OK, cool. We got that built. Now, let's go over to S3. Let's go over to Zeta. And, oh, well, where is everything? Refresh. Nothing's replicating. Any idea why nothing's replicating? Okay, so what's happening is nothing has changed, and the replication will only do when things change. So if we go and we modify our good old index.html file again, and instead of 450, we're just going to be, let's do 300. Save that. And we go to our S3. We go over to Alpha Web. And we're going to go and upload, add a file, add the one we just modified, upload that. Okay, succeeded. And all we did was just a little resizing on one of them. And then if we go back to S3, go to Zeta, refresh. Takes a little bit. Okay, let's see if this. Okay, so with replication, what happens is it only replicates if a modification or changes happen to a file. So it's sort of like how reverse DNS lookup works in Active Directory, in that from when you turn on reverse lookup forward, everything else is automatically put in there. So in this case, once you make your replication rule, after you make your rule, everything after that point that's updated will be modified. Oh, I know what it is. We just did a modification. We didn't do a new file. That's it. OK, so what we need to do is we are going to go to images, and we're going to upload, and we're going to add a file. Sorry about that. Pictures. Let's grab a nice SpaceX picture. Upload that. And exit. Back to S3. Now we go there. OK. Oh, the index one did finally show up. Replication can take a little while. So we got that one, and our other one is going to show up. I just had to be more patient. So what it is sort of like reverse lookup. Replication doesn't happen until after you've turned on replication, so anything new that happens after that fact will then replicate. So setting up your replication rule would be something that you would want to do early on in your architecture build out before you actually start putting stuff into your buckets. So if you already have stuff in your buckets, what you're going to find is that they aren't going to actually move over, whereas anything new that's moved over, put in there, will then move across. And go back to there. And I'm just being impatient here. Sorry about that. And it doesn't really give you a view into when replication is going to happen, which is one of the things that's a little frustrating. You just have it set up and that it should just work in a relatively straightforward period of time. But our site is working just hunky-dory. And let's see if we get... Okay, come on. There we go. So now our images folder replicated and our image file itself is available. And then if we wanted to go look at it, it's actually not letting us because it's in the backup site, which doesn't have public permissions to it. But if we went back to S3 page and over to Alpha Web, went into images, and went into our space, followed our link there. Now we would be able to see it. So the backup is protected. You aren't able to actually web address it, but then your original files are fully web set up. And then you would, so we went through the lab. So then at the end, you'd have answered all the questions. So when we went into the show, access multiple questions. So you've answered all these questions, you successfully finished the lab, then you're ready to go and hit submit, and then it'll do the scoring for you. But again, the one gotcha on this lab is to make sure that the site that you have all of your web stuff is a higher up in a sort than the name of the website that you're doing your backups to. So if these two were flipped, when you do your scoring, it would be looking at this one and looking for all the rules in this S3 bucket. They aren't there and you aren't going to get the points for it. So just be aware of that. If you're running into problems on that, that would be where you're running into a problem. It's just how the script is written, is that it's just looking at the instance that's spun up, looking in the S3 buckets, and it's just going for the first S3 bucket that it finds other than the predefined one and going from there. So that's just the one gotcha on this lab to be aware of, but otherwise pretty straightforward. On the first lab, the gotcha is to make sure that you have the dash in there in the name of the S3 bucket on the first lab.